Hi, I'm Mr. Bohan, and I teach 4th and 5th grade this year. This is a short digital story about my journey through writing this year. I hope to paint a picture of how I was able to use Vygotsky's theories about social constructivism to take my students on a journey from 3rd grade writing into 4th grade writing. I'm also going to show how what they learned in 3rd grade has really impacted and affected the process that we've had to go through in 4th grade into developing into deeper writing and really extending our informational writing to be more than just a list of facts. So this is my room. At the beginning of the year, I had it set up mostly for organizational purpose because I do teach a 4th and 5th combined this year. Early on, I was impressed with their narrative writing skills. It became very obvious that they had spent a considerable amount of time in 3rd grade discussing onomatopoeia and bold beginnings, and they were really into the personal narrative writings that we started out on in the beginning of the year. As we progressed through the year, though, it became clear very quickly that the transition from narrative into other genres of writing, like persuasive and particularly informational, was going to be something I was going to have to address because they were so ingrained with the ideas of narrative writing and getting those hooks in at the beginning and having those bold beginnings and having that conversational tone to it that it was difficult for them to transition over from one to the other. So my twist, as it may be, is just that the idea that my students had this knowledge, this previous knowledge of writing that didn't necessarily translate very well to this new type of writing that was asking them to do. And so they had these ideas about writing that we had to really address directly in order to move on to other types of writing. So during this journey, I would rely very heavily on the idea of scaffolding that this guy named Vygotsky came up with. And no, not that kind of scaffolding. This guy, Vygotsky, came up with this idea of the zone of proximal development. Basically, the idea behind that is there are things that a student can already do, and then there are things that the student can't do at all, and then somewhere in the middle there are things that a student could do with an expert helper or coach. And that's where I came in as the teacher. And he called that help scaffolding, that moves us from the things that we can do into things that we couldn't do before using scaffolding or that help from an expert. So in the graphic, you can see how the knowledge of the student is built upon. They come in with these preconceived ideas about the way things are, and by scaffolding, by that help from the teacher role there, that coach role there, they're able to move from something that they can do on their own through something that they can do with help, and eventually that scaffolding is pulled away so that the student can do that activity on their own. True to social constructivist theory, I start with the big ideas here. So we'll start with mentor text that we read, showing students examples of what great informational writing looks like in textbooks and other news articles. Then we move from that step into me writing with the students on the board, giving them examples of what that looks like and thinking aloud for them so they can see that expert writing in process. After students have seen that big idea of what we're going for in this, and they've seen me do writing, and then we spend time writing together as a class, and I'll write and ask for suggestions from them, and then we'll go through and talk about how we can make it stronger and how we can extend that informational writing to make it an interesting piece that a reader is going to actually want to hear. So those are my first pieces of scaffolding, and once we get through that, then I take away those scaffoldings and allow students to start writing just the beginning of a piece that they can start to form and shape. The next step in social learning is students getting together in small groups and pairs to compare their writing and to make suggestions. I use 2 likes and a wish with my students. They share 2 things that they liked about a partner's writing and then 1 thing that they wish the partner would do with the writing. And then the partner gets to go back and look at that writing for themselves and edit and revise it as they go through. The next step in our process is for the student to conference with me as the teacher, as the mentor, as the coach, to give them instruction and make suggestions on where they can improve and grow their writing and make it stronger and extend it. Other scaffolding that I have in place are student handouts that have information that's key to our many lessons that we do throughout the unit. We also have a conferring checklist that they use with a peer and then they use with myself. In addition to that, we have a rubric that I go through with the students to establish what strong writing looks like with them, so they have the end goal in sight throughout this whole process and not just the little pieces, but we start with the end and then work our way up towards that. And key to this whole process is the fact that we go through this entire process multiple times throughout the learning. And in the beginning, it's very structured and very scaffolded, and there's a lot of teacher help there, and there's a lot of mentor review, and there's a lot of peer review, and we work our way all the way to the end, where finally at the very end, I'm asking them to write on their own without that assistance, and pulling away all that extra support so that we can see the process that they've gone through from a 3rd grade writer into a 4th grade writer. And by that point, my hope and our goal is that they're able to use the appropriate voice and move away from that narrative writing into an expository tone that engages readers. By the time we get to this point, my 4th graders have written a book and they can call themselves writers.